Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is the story of Puranjana. And that story of Puranjana has an episode, and there are some paragraphs that Prabhupada writes about how to understand the disappearance of the spiritual master. Some of these are intense, these are heavy, so take what you can and glean from what you can. So here is what Prabhupada says. When the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry exactly as a queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called association of vani, or words. Physical presence is called vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, to become his devotee, to worship the Supreme Lord and bow down before him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles. But when he disappears, things at once again become disordered. And I will add at this point, this is exactly what ISKCON went through for several years after Prabhupada's disappearance. Exactly what Prabhupada says here. ISKCON definitely went through it. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of the husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. A devoted disciple of a spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. I'll add another point here. Prabhupada was first given the instruction to preach in English in 1922. It was not until 1965 that Prabhupada was able to finally fulfill the order of his Guru Maharaj to come to the West and establish Krishna consciousness. So that means from 1922 to 1965, what's that, 43 years? Prabhupada simply meditated on the same instruction that Bhaktisiddhanta gave him at the first meeting, later on in Radhakund, and the same instruction that he wrote a letter to Prabhupada just before his passing away. Preach the message of Krishna consciousness in English to the Western speaking world. So Prabhupada never gave up that instruction. That is something to think about. And the spiritual master leaves, Prabhupada is pointing out, all you have left is the instruction. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to reestablish the principles of religion, so too his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to reestablish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciple to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down the life and abandon all personal considerations. And by the way, that was Prabhupada's meditation upon coming to America. He read a purport and he read a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti. And that purport was that once you take the order of the spiritual master as your life and soul, all facility will be made possible. So it's simply a question of taking the order of the spiritual master as your heart and soul. That, Prabhupada says, is the secret of success. Prabhupada's purport continues. In his Paramatma feature, Krishna is the oldest friend of everyone. According to Vedic injunction, Krishna is sitting with the living entity side by side. According to the Shruti mantra, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakaya, the Lord is sitting within the heart of every living entity as Suhrit, the best friend. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives one all chances to enjoy materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment and instead turn one's face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him. Now, this next sentence of Prabhupada is astounding. Every time I read this sentence, I become completely inspired. Listen carefully. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of his spiritual master, that resolution is tantamount to actually seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Should I repeat it? Yes, I will repeat it. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, one's resolution is tantamount to actually seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. This is technically called Vani Seva. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti states, this is what I was referring to just a few minutes ago, right here. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Bhagavad Gita commentary on the Bhagavad Gita verse 241, Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kuru nandara, that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That was Prabhupada's constant meditation why he came to America. Thank God Prabhupada did that. Because if Prabhupada had not, none of us would be here right now. But because Prabhupada made that his life and soul, we are now Namahat family. Hari Bol. Let's continue with the purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that unless one is very highly elevated in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot see Him as He is. Nonetheless, if one sticks to the principles enunciated by the spiritual master, somehow or other, one is in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is in the heart, Krishna can advise a sincere disciple from within. So that's another important point. Just be serious and sincere. That's all that matters in your spiritual life. Don't think about becoming big, this and that, trying to make a name for yourself. No. Just be sincere and serious. Then you will become perfect. That's it. Just stay meek and humble, serious and sincere. Everything else will automatically come. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Teshang satatayuktanang bhajatang priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogang tang yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship Krishna with love, Krishna gives the understanding by which they may come to him. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he or she immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, either by Vani or Vapu. This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he or she will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Srila Bilvamangala Thakur has therefore said, "If I am engaged in devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily I can perceive your presence everywhere. And as far as liberation is concerned, I think that liberation stands at my door with folded hands, waiting to serve me, and all material conveniences stand with her." If one is very highly advanced in devotional service, he or she will have no difficulty in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one engages in the service of the spiritual master, one not only sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but attains liberation. As far as material conveniences are concerned, they automatically come, just as the maidservants of a queen follow the queen wherever she goes. Liberation is no problem for the pure devotee, and all material inconveniences simply awaiting one at all stages of life. When one is perplexed about what to do in the absence of the spiritual master, at such a time, the Supersoul immediately appears, provided the devotee is purified in heart by following the directions of the spiritual master. A sincere devotee who follows the instructions of the spiritual master certainly gets direct instruction from one's heart from Krishna, Supersoul. Thus, a sincere devotee is always helped directly or indirectly by the spiritual master and Supersoul. And this is confirmed in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai, Bhakti Lata Bij. If the devotee serves his or her spiritual master sincerely, Krishna automatically becomes pleased. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasada. By satisfying the spiritual master, one automatically satisfies Krishna. Thus, the devotee becomes enriched by both the spiritual master and Krishna. The Supersoul is eternally the friend of the living entity and always remains with one. The Supersoul has always been ready to help the living entity even before the creation of this material world. The supersoul has been accompanying the living entity since before the creation. Thus, one has to select a bona fide spiritual master and become enlightened to one's original consciousness. In this way, the individual soul can understand that he or she is always subordinate to the supersoul. As soon as one declines to remain subordinate and tries to become an enjoyer, one begins material conditioning. When one abandons this spirit of being an individual owner or enjoyer, then one becomes situated in liberated state. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.